Hi, this is the Lambda Cartel. I'm your host, Pablo Rivera, and today I'm here with Ody Mbegbu, and I hope I got your last name right. I was just talking with Ody, asking him about how to pronounce his last name. I'm pretty awful with any last name that's not in Spanish. So Ody,
Mm.
I apologize if I did any damage to your last name.
Nah, it's all good, man. It's all
It's,
good.
it's all good. So
Yeah.
today we want to talk about. Oh, so before this podcast, before we started recording, Ody and I spent like 30 minutes talking, and Ody mentioned a video called "How to Create a Movement in 3 Minutes." And that video caught my attention, and I told him, let's record a show about that because for the past 2 months, and yes, it's been now 2 months since we started Lambda Cartel. We have been trying and working on creating a movement, on creating a team of developers, not only focus on working on functional programming, but on building correct systems, and on also promoting the what I think is the approach of correctness in software, not necessarily functional programming, because correctness can be applied to OOP and other paradigms. But anyhow, let's talk about that subject of creating a movement. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah. We were talking about like uh it take for example Nikeza, we want to start a movement, um we want to push a kind of open source community around software developers who are all about the craft, who focus on not just correctness, but also focus on like you know good craftsmanship, and we are using functional programming as a tool to get there, although you could also have correctness with OOP and other other application models as well. I like what it reminds me of something Eric Meyer said one time. Eric Meyer is one of my heroes. I look up to him. He's one of the people that brought Link to C sharp, and he likes to wear tie and dye, and tie and dye is an African thing. I don't know if you if you notice. In fact, to be specific, it's Nigerian, Yoruba, Igbo kind of tradition.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, he said something that was really fascinating. This is one of the core core people. He used to be on the Haskell team. The guys who develop Haskell. So he's wired to be a pure functional programmer, true and true. But on one day he said that he likes mutation. He said he said he likes it because he said he likes it because it allows him get things done.
Exactly. Exactly. And I was reading that. I was reading that the other day on a thread on Hacker News about functional programming, and maybe it's not a fact,
Mm.
but that people have an issue with writing loops in Haskell. And I knew a little bit about that, and people were talking about how to get around that. And I'm like, well, if it gets to the point where you have to think about getting around writing a loop, then I think you failed. you know. Um, and somebody else said, hey, you don't do that. Just fold, reduce, and map. Like, well, I mean, this guy is right. You can replace loops, but sometimes loops are necessary. But getting back to the subject of how to create a movement,
Mm.
you mentioned a video by Derek Sivers. I think it's the
Yeah.
guy behind CD Baby. I think he's the founder of CD Baby, something like that. I know he's a
Okay.
very famous founder in Silicon Valley.
Yes. Yeah. So to be honest, I've not followed any of his other work, but in the case of this particular video on how to start a movement, he points out a key ingredient, because what happens is the whole video, 3 minutes long, is a very short video. It won't take any of your time at all, but you will learn a lot from it. In a space of 3 minutes, they show you how a particular guy, because there's like, you know, a lot of people at the beach, and they are playing, you know, just blasting a particular kind of music. I don't know what the music is, but everybody is trying to be, you know, calm and civil and everything, even while this crazy music is playing. So the guy just stands up, goes to a corner of the beach and starts to dance, right? And while he's dancing, he dances there for a very long period of time. Like, if the whole video is 3 minutes, he dances there for like up to 45 seconds to almost a minute, you know, before someone now joins him. And now, you know, the key thing that, you know, the guy was trying to point out from the video, I think it's better, you know, you go ahead and watch it, but the key thing he was trying to point out was that first person that joined him is essentially the key ingredient in starting a movement, not the guy that started the movement himself. So when the guy joined him, the leader now took it upon himself to show the first follower or first disciple, this is how the dance is, you know, give him like an understanding of, you know, how to do the dance and everything. And at that point, he made that guy look like an equal. He put that guy on the same level as him, so that it was no more about himself. It was now about the movement, right? The movement of, you know, crazy dancing or whatever, or what have you. So
Yeah.
by the time the second guy now understands, you know, the idea or the concept of what that main guy was trying to do, right? He was now, you know, also dancing as well as the main guy. And all of a sudden, people who are watching the two of them dancing did not see a lone crazy guy dancing. Rather, they saw like two guys dancing, a movement. And by looking at the what do they call it, the first disciple, right? Because for people to know how to follow, they look at other followers. They don't necessarily look at the leader, because the leader by himself doesn't tell you how you're supposed to follow. But by the time, you know, they looked at the follower, they were able to understand that, okay, this is what this movement is about. You know, at that point, it started to gain momentum. The movement started to gain momentum to the point where you get to a particular equilibrium where the number of people dancing were equal to the number of people sitting down, you know. And all of a sudden, next thing, people started to join. It was like an exponential growth, and before you know what's happening, it now becomes a statement to sit down, something that, you know, previously was like the norm. Okay, sitting down was the norm to do. Now everybody is dancing. That if you are sitting down, you are making a political statement, you know, that kind of a thing. So the key takeaway there is, if you're starting any movement, you have to make sure that two things. Number one is that there is a sense of ownership across the movement, not just you essentially. Take for example the F sharp community. It's a classic example. You know, F sharp for the longest time was Don Syme's baby. You know, he nurtured it, he cared for it, he was making talks, he was speaking at conferences and so on and so forth. But F sharp has grown to a point where he can now dial back, and other people now own the platform, other people now own the language, other people now feel like they have like F sharp is, you know, is theirs, sort of, you know, until a movement gets to that point where the members feel that like they have ownership of it. You know, you won't get the kind of that movement won't take off. So I know I'm saying I'm talking very long, but just follow up my idea. Like, for example, recently something happened in the .NET community. I don't know if you are aware, with respect to NuGet and Packet.
Oh yeah, I saw that thread when it started, and I mean, to give a little bit of context, like somebody made a pull request to NuGet, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, in order to integrate Packet into the whole enchilada, right? And the person who was in charge of the project from Microsoft gave a very brief explanation. I cannot say if it was very clear or not, because I'm not within that specific ecosystem. But the, you know, like the feeling that it got from the thread and from the explosion, because it exploded on social media. I saw that I saw people talking about it on Twitter, on that rant. Oh my God, on Facebook. I saw it on Instagram. I mean, I saw it everywhere. And the feeling they had is that the person from Microsoft who was, you know, was in charge of doing the merge did not give a proper explanation to reject the pull request, because the pull request was you know, was declined, and people went up in arms and they were angry, like, you know, what is this happening? And they started to bring up, you know, the old dirty laundry, you know, that Microsoft has a bucket full of, like, oh, you know, this is the old Microsoft. We thought you had changed. And suddenly, like, everybody was talking about that.
Yeah.
And I was very, I think I retweeted one of the earlier tweets because I wanted to bring attention to the issue, but not put negative attention on Microsoft. Like I didn't want to pressure them into merging it just because, right? If it doesn't fit their roadmap, then it doesn't fit their roadmap. It is their product, you know, if you like it or not. And, you know, if you don't like it, then fork it, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting seeing this same thing of followers and people suddenly, you know, like standing up and dancing, you know, in a way to the same rhythm, because suddenly the thread had 100 replies, and people are like, you know, this sucks. We really want this merchant, yada yada yada, and everybody was like in unison. And I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong, because for the you know, for the context of this conversation that we're having, it doesn't really matter. But it was interesting seeing how it went viral without it having any, you know.
So you're absolutely right. We could go on a tangent and talk about whether it is right or wrong and the efficacies of it, or whether Microsoft should have done that. But the key takeaway there is that you have a community that is as passionate about F# that Don Syme doesn't need to push for it per se. Like, those people saw it as, you know, like they saw it as their baby, not just Don Syme's baby. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yes, so, absolutely. They felt that the fact that they understood that they were being treated fairly, you know, and this is not passing judgment on the situation. I am projecting what I saw on the thread. They acted as if they felt they weren't being treated fairly, so it was as if you were insulting them, right? And the project and you know, work on the business side of things, on the product side of things. I don't only do development. And I don't know if you've noticed the Lambda Cartel Twitter account. I'm the one who manages it. I'm the one who pretty much hosts podcasts. I'm working on the website, although you know, that has been that is being revived soon. And I've been working behind the scenes trying to start this movement, and you bring this up, right? There's a lot of key items that we're trying to get into play, you know, to put into movement. And this, you know, and this subject, it really translates to what we're doing right now, because one, we really want to make the Lambda Cartel something that people can join in, right? You know, I didn't mean for it to be exclusive. I meant for it to be inclusive. That's why we have people from all over the world, different nationalities. You know, the only constant is that we talk in English and we write code. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
And you know, trying to get that sort of movement going, it's a bit hard, you know, and because for every thing that you do, for every project that you take on, that initial push is very different. Because, for example, if I want to make a video that goes viral, and it's about cats, then I cannot make it about cats being scared or jumping or fighting or cats doing funny things, because there's a million of videos like that, because the first video was very popular. So you have to come up with this original approach, and then just repeat it until you're sick and tired of it, and then repeat it more. and this has been the Lambda Cartel, at least from that particular perspective for me, of how do I communicate what we are, how do I interact with people, what kind of things should I do, should I bring to the table, what kind of ideas do I want to develop in order to not only invite people to work on our projects, but to listen to our podcast and to become a part of the cartel. Because, you know, if it's the five of us, you know, working on something and that's it, then it's boring, right? It's having those comments on Twitter. Like the other day, I did a Twitter thread the day before we were recording the podcast about what makes a bad developer, and that was a very successful thing that we did, because we had people come in, chime, and give their opinion, and then I read one of the tweets live on the podcast, and suddenly I know that those people who were a part of that discussion last week are going to be not only willing but anxious to listen to this other episode, because now they want to know what we're up to next. And in open source, I've noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that people don't really approach that. Like, movements happen due to luck. Like, jQuery became a thing because, yes, it solved a huge problem, and it did it beautifully, but it was just dumb luck, right?
Yeah.
There's no I don't think there's a lot of or from what I've seen, right? There's not a very organized approach to making things go viral or being known.
Yeah, there's not a repeatable recipe. It's not like, oh, do this, then you become popular and successful. Not necessarily. You could do all those, and the environment will produce something else that would overshadow you. So there's that as well.
I mean, you can. I think if you go to the meta aspect of it, because there's this developer, the guy behind Webpack, Sean Larkin, he's very good at marketing things, and that's just his personality, who he is. And you know, I've recognized that I've identified certain things that he does. For example, he's always interacting with the community. He's always, like you said, giving people ownership of things. He's letting them take ownership, not just assigning things. He says, you know, he creates something and he says, okay, so if anybody wants to step up, there you go. And then he actively works with them one-on-one, or promotes the fact that that person needs help or assistance, so that other people stand up. He also makes education or educating users and developers very important. He uses a platform called Teachable to teach people how to use Webpack. And last time I checked, it had, like, he published it like a month ago or so, that course on Webpack, and it had like more than 40,000 views, some crazy thing like that. So, you know, I think that if we take that approach of educating people, of being overly supportive, of being open about things, of doing bite-sized projects, you know, small things that people can do. I think we can leverage that into at least some very goodwill that can then develop and grow into something, you know, big. But again, it comes down to what we're talking about off the air, which is we all have lives outside of the Lambda Cartel. We all have our own things. Like this is our open source project, but it's also our open source meta project. You know, we have code, but people can see, like, people can look right through the organization and see what's going on and make some assumptions as to where we're standing. And we also have very different personalities. And I think right now at the 2-month mark, what we're trying to work through is that period in time where the team or a team of developers is starting to know each other, is starting to trust each other, is starting to feel confident in how people may react, or they're simply not shy or not worried about stepping in anybody's toes. And if we make it past this moment, if we make it past, I think what's going to come out the other day, it's going to be beautiful, you know?
Yeah. I think where we need to improve is getting the vision out. So I gave, you know, when we're talking of the air, I gave an example of how, you know, maybe, I don't know if people know this, but in my day job, I'm a manager. So I have developers I work with. I'm in charge of a whole, like, platform, essentially, the Niger platform, which includes a YouTube clone, a free internet, you know, a Wi-Fi hotspot solution, and all that. So I was explaining how in the beginning, I tend to be a OCD control freak, you know, like someone who just wants to have things in a particular way, you know. And I think, that could be said for, you know, most developers, especially developers who care about correctness, who care about quality and all that. So, but what tended to happen was, you know, those kind of developers don't necessarily make for good managers, and I'll explain why. I ended up having to make sure that, okay, everything is according to exactly how it goes on in my mind and all those kind of things. So what tends to happen is when we have, like, team discussions, I tend to, like, dominate the team discussions. I tend to, like, even though, yes, more often than not, my ideas are actually good ideas, but it's not always the case, right? So what now started happening was the members of my team started to, like, slowly hands off. They didn't see the project like our unit's project. Rather, they always saw it as, oh, this is Ody's project, you know, that kind of a thing. So anytime they wanted to make decisions, they would have to, like, consult me and say, okay, and this is with the best intentions. Okay, XYZ, I have this option, I have that option. Which option do I pick? And I end up having to make those decisions. And what ended up happening was that I, you know, unless I moved them, unless I pushed them myself. And that became, over time, I started to burn out, you know. It started to affect me. So what I now learned to do instead is to work the other way around. Rather than, always giving my opinion, I would instead try to influence my team member. So what would happen is I would try to like inculcate the culture, right? My my core values, essentially, the kind of things that I really care about. Like I care about correctness, I care about maintainability, I care about testing, and so on and so forth. So by inculcating those core values, I was able to like empower my team members. So anytime they came to me and said, okay, what about this, what about that, how do I do this, how do I do that, I'll ask them, what do you think? You just do whatever you feel is correct. Take ownership. So I encourage them to take ownership of like the project, take ownership of certain projects, certain aspects of projects. And what has now started to happen is that my involvement has been starting to dial down more and more, and it's now giving me the window of opportunities to do like long-term strategy, to look at like the whole project and say, okay, what is important from a holistic standpoint. And it has also meant that even me, I have personal time for myself to even work on nikeza and other things, So it's really important that if you're starting a movement, it's very clear what the tenets of that movement is. So, and in such a way that the whole idea is out in the open for every member of the movement to take ownership of any particular section or alter it as they see fit. Once you have that, once you have that ball rolling, it stops becoming our project or Ody's project. It now becomes my project or my area or my section or whatever the case may be. So those are the things I've learned from being a manager.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this question is fair to ask on the air, but since I don't know, I'm gonna ask it still, because I feel like you and I have a strong enough relationship that you're not gonna take this the wrong way, and please don't, right?
No.
So how would you approach creating that sort of ownership within the Lambda Cartel? How would you approach that, given that we have no management? Nobody here is in charge of anybody, right? I cannot tell you, Ody, you do this, and Mitchell, you do that, or Adam, you do that, or Scott, you do that, right? I cannot point a finger or even assign things, because we have our own lives. It has to be something where people, put a foot forward and step up and do something. So how do you create that? How would you approach that? And like, how would you create that environment of ownership when you cannot assign things? How do you motivate people?
Okay, so so first of all, like I feel like my experience, being a manager would actually not help me in such a scenario, because in the case of my team, they're actually paid to work with me, so I don't even need to do anything, but like, they feel like, okay, yes, they're supposed to work with me. We're supposed to get along. We're supposed to get stuff done, because it affects our bottom line, affects our KPIs, etc., etc. But in an open source project, that becomes trickier, because now, you don't have any leverage whatsoever in telling people what to do or even instructing them how to do it. You want it to be because it's almost like volunteer work. You want them to feel propelled to do it. But if I was to answer, I think I have a fairly good solution. So there is this video I watched, The Science of Motivation. I think What Motivates Us or something like that, by Daniel Pink. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen it.
Yeah. So in that video, he mentions that, what motivates people are three different things. It's mainly in three categories. You have autonomy, mastery, and I can't remember what the third one is. Autonomy, mastery, and is it self-actualization or something like that? But I think autonomy and mastery are the key things. So to motivate people, you have to give them autonomy. You have to, which still boils down to what I was saying earlier, you know, taking ownership. Autonomy is not necessarily saying, oh, you are free to do whatever you want. Is autonomy has to do with encouraging it, right? It's not just saying you're free to do it. You have to encourage it. You have to encourage people to like become autonomous, to handle things on their own, to decide, to become, you know, to be in charge of their destiny in a way. Mastery is another thing too, and in fact, that's what got us started in Nikeza in the first place. You know, we're using technologies we don't really know about that we're trying to learn, that we're trying to perfect. So I think that is another approach, and I think patience as well. Like, you know, these things are going to take time. You know, and
Yes.
yeah, it's going to
This
take
thing
time.
is going to take time. Yes, that's
Yeah,
something I realized very early on.
yeah.
Like, nikeza is, like some of us disagree with what I'm going to say, because I've talked to other members,
Mm.
but it is my personal opinion, and it's not like I'm not trying to push it, but this is something that takes definitely more than 2 months to build, um, because it's huge. Because even though the idea is very simple, the concept is very simple, there are a lot of tricky things that you want to get in, that you want to do properly, and I think that there's also one issue that's working against us, which is, and I'm sidetracking a little bit, right? Sorry about that. Is that
No, it's fine.
we don't have a roadmap. We don't really have an architecture. Because it started as a front end project that then had a back end added to it, or at least that's how I understood it from the start. I probably misunderstood, how it was presented, and we had a period of discovery of how it's going to be, and so sometimes the reason I asked that question was that I feel that it's one of my duties to make sure that and other members are motivated and are able to get things done, because I want you to succeed. I want you to do things that help you grow as a developer and as a person. Like, I want you to go and crush it, right? That's my motivation. I want you to kick so much butt that your feet get tired, right?
Thanks, man.
and it becomes, and I'm trying to hack that still, and I think it's going to be an endless process. It's going to be something that will never have a permanent solution, right? Because that's how we work. Like, everybody's motivated by different things at different points in time, right? Like today, I might be motivated to do this podcast because it's the 10th podcast, but the 11th podcast is gonna be motivated by something else.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to get to this number 10 because for me it's a milestone. It means we're doing something, and we haven't blown up, and we haven't like, we haven't ended up arguing about stupid things. And to me, that was a milestone. That was a goal. So I want everybody to be, to achieve things, and I want that, and because that's how I think I can achieve my own things. If I sit down and start blogging by myself, which I've done and I do, and I just write, and I do things by myself, then I'm not going to be as successful as if I work with other people and through other people. Yeah. So for me, motivation within the cartel is a very hard subject, because like, motivating you, Ody, is very different than motivating Scott or Mitchell or Adam, because you have your own goals. And
That is true.
I don't know, and to be honest, since I've only known you for 2 months, like I don't know what those goals are, right? So I don't know how to get up and start dancing in a way that gets your attention and you start dancing as well.
Yeah.
So
So okay.
uh-huh.
So sorry to cut you. Like
Sure.
I've been thinking of what you just said is essentially what I've been thinking of for a while now. And okay, so let me just give you all my train of thoughts and I'll tell you
Sure.
how what conclusion I came to. For the past a week plus, I've been working on a internal project at my office where we are building what's essentially an advert engine similar to Google and all that, similar to AdSense and all that. So it has been like intense amount of work on a daily basis to the point where I have to be staying over at the office to, catch up and all that. So, but, as that work, pressure started to like reduce, I started to think of Nikeza. So one of the things I thought of was, it's only a matter of time before we start to burn out, right? In terms of the way we are, the pace at which we are moving. And I'm already starting to see small signs of that. So I was like, how can I change this? How can I inject, like prevent disaster from happening? And one thing that came to my mind was that I know the only like you said earlier, right? The only thing that is common to all of us is that we speak English and we know how to write code. That's it, right? But I feel like aside from that, us we being developers, what motivates developers is actually seeing their app in production. Nothing motivates developers more than their app is up and running in production and it's having some kind of impact. And I think that that's what is lacking currently in Nikeza, right? We've been working on this thing, but we can't see any, like tangible impact. We can't see any numbers. We don't have any we can't see any direct. We know it's going to be successful. We know it's going to be useful. We know it's going to change people's lives, but we can't see any of that now. And how we can
that's true.
Yeah, and how we can solve that is to aggressively push for first deployment. Okay, so in fact, that's what motivated me to pick up the code and start working on it again, to see how do we get what we have, no matter how small, into production, have a URL that is live, that we can get people to start signing up, or at least let people get some kind of value, even if it's with just one provider, even if it's with the WordPress or the YouTube only that we start with, and we just start seeing how the developer community takes it. I think that would do two things. One, it would motivate us that are working on the project to keep adding more features, to keep pushing it, and also it will motivate external people to join in as well, because like you rightly said, we have lives, we have jobs that we do on a daily basis, and we may not always be available to work on Nikeza. But what will be the power of open source is not that it's on one person. The power of open source is that anybody can just jump in, pitch in, add, contribute code, and it will move and at least keep the ball rolling. By the time we all put our input, no matter how little it is, it will have a multiplying effect. So for me now, my personal sub goal is just to make sure that we get a deployment at least in the next 2-3 weeks. So even if the deployment is very scattered, or people can't, it looks, even if the way it looks now without Bootstrap, at least get it live, get a URL. Then I feel like once we pass through that gate, everything will take care of itself.
That's that's really the way I've been thinking, because even though we're doing this open source, Nikeza feels it has a startup flavor to it. In
Yes.
terms of not in terms of money or anything like that, but in terms of the way you should build this, right? You want to do an MVP. You want to do a minimal viable product.
Yeah.
Where, like in terms of Nikeza, I always envisioned it as a website that was just static, right? Even if we have a backend, it's just serving one HTML file, right?
Yeah.
And it has a set of links that we've manually added until next week when we add a database, right? And so we build it like we build it. We start very simple, and then we start building and building and building, and suddenly you look back, and you have something that maybe resembles what the end product is going to be like, but it's at least functional and it's getting used, and people are being motivated by it. Right now, and I'm like I feel like I'm guilty of it, right? Is that the way we approached it first, because it was an open source project, we didn't treat it like an MVP. We're like, okay, we're going to write a lot of code, and when it's ready, we're going to push it out, right? And I feel that's been something that has worked against us, because now it's like, well, it's not going to be ready in 2 weeks. It's going to be ready in 2 months. Oh, it's going to be ready in 6 months. Oh, it's going to be ready in 1 year. And you lose motivations because there's no thing. And at the same time, I started a project at work called Amy, which is a CMS. And the name Amy, my daughter came up with it, and that's the name of it, right? My daughter, by the way, is the best at coming up with names for software products. And it's a simple CMS. And I started very simple. Like, I'm doing very simple things. I'm pushing it out. I'm having it build on my machine, and I'm having it run on my machine. I haven't put it out on production yet because the actual design is not finished, right? And it needs to be at a certain minimum level in order to be pushed to production, because it actually represents a company. Yeah. So I've been doing that, like, very minimal. If I were to show you, I have a whiteboard full of post-it notes, in 3 columns, like to do, in progress, and done. I'm doing a so that I forget that. I want 0.1. And I feel
you're breaking up. Or am I the one that's breaking up?
I think it's. Do you think we could approach Nikeza as a minimal viable product without having to delete all the work we've done?
Okay. To be honest, I think we can. We still can. It's not too late for that, right? I just think that we need to focus more on. I think we need to focus more on. Should I say harmonizing what we've done, just cleaning it up, and like harmonizing, cleaning up what we've done, and just ship it out there. Yes, it will look ugly as hell, but at least that's an opportunity for people to see us while we are building it,
Right.
But I think yes, but I think what's most important is that we should just change our focus, because right now our focus is on building the entire platform end to end. But I think we should instead focus our energy on getting that MVP out, no matter how small or how ugly it looks. Just getting it out there, and let that we could even have like maybe a blog post or something that just shows the progress. Each week when we make changes to it, we take a snapshot of what it is, or put a link to the functionality and say, and just, put like some change sets there. Because that's another thing I learned too. That's another thing I learned too, developing, doing this whole agile process at work, is that software is never finished, really. It's only abandoned.
Yeah.
So
and that hurts. It's like you get a puppy and you feed it and you take care of it and you sleep with it, and suddenly somebody takes the puppy away.
Yeah.
And the puppy abandoned you, right? because nobody abandons software. Like, you get kicked off, right?
True.
Oh my god. It's a deep pain.
What we decided to do was, we went the approach of Azure, because I remember there was a time when Scott Gu recently initially took over the control of Windows Azure. He enforced this culture of shipping every 2 weeks. So what would happen is every team or sub team would plan what they are supposed to ship in this release. And if whatever you were working on didn't make it, fine, it wouldn't ship with, this week, it would ship next week. And what they were doing, in fact, they still do it to this day for the past 3 or 4 years now, is every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, they have a blog post where they just come out and list out all the features that were shipped into production, every week. And then people could follow the progress as it's moving along. And you can see this thread all over Microsoft, from VS Code to, TFS, VSTS, and so on. Because sometimes it feels as if VS Code is updating every day. Well, that's because that's the process they follow. They just ship whatever is available. Okay, every 2 weeks they have a precise schedule, and every time they meet that schedule, whatever is available they ship it. Whatever is not available, they try to ask, okay, why didn't it follow in this release? Was it that it was bigger than we thought, or it was more complicated? But ultimately, people are using the product while the product is being actively developed, because sometimes you really don't know. You could, if I've learned anything, is that we developers, we like to sit in our ivory towers and assume that we know what's best for the user. But what tends to happen is, if you are developing it in the open, the user would actually guide you on what's best for them. So even the questions they ask you, the assumption you make, right, you'll be able to validate it with the users, as opposed to sitting down in your chair, validating it and going ahead and developing a robust solution and now realizing that the users only need 10% of it. So
Absolutely. So let me ask you, I mean, right now, I realize that if I do something crazy, like add a static HTML page with a bunch of links, which is what Nikeza would be, like a bunch of links to our content, and push it to an Azure instance, I think that would be a big enough spark to drive others to say, hey, wait a minute, you're not going to get in front of me. Right? Because we are very competitive. Like I am, that's one of the things that kind of like creating this movement is that I am very competitive. I will not lose to Ody. I will not lose to Adam, Mitchell, or Scott. You guys will not beat me, right? I will own you. You are mine. So I don't have access to the server, to the instance. Last time I used Azure, I swore off that I was not going to use it again ever, because the UI is just horrible. I mean,
when was that?
Like 2 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Painting the behind. So do you have access to pushing Nikeza to production?
So it's actually much better now. Azure, like I told you, every 2 weeks they make changes to it. So you can imagine there is almost a world of difference between the last time you went to Azure and now. In fact, the user interface now is a lot better. It's not all there yet in terms of usability, but it is very good. Probably, if you ask me, probably better than Amazon's AWS. That's my opinion anyway.
But that's
But
that's not saying a lot itself.
yeah.
Amazon. I love Amazon. But a lot of respect for them. But their UI is just, it's meant for consultants to make money, and that's the truth, right? And I cannot blame them because that's their business, right? You cannot blame them on that. But what I'm asking you is, what would it take to push Nikeza out to production tonight?
So, okay. So if we want to push it tonight.
For my tonight.
Yeah. So, in fact, Azure as a whole is so simple that I could, we have the whole container stuff going on, but yeah, creating a web app is a point and click kind of thing, so it doesn't take much to deploy an app.
So
today, if you want,
who has access? Do you have access?
So right now nobody has access. Like, we don't have any we've not, like, there's no infrastructure whatsoever. So
so there's no instance. So I would have to set it up. I would have to set that up. So it doesn't matter if I think it's actually easier, because if I just put a flat file, an HTML file somewhere, or maybe I don't know. I mean, I don't know, since we're using
containers.
Docker. Yeah, since we're using containers, I don't know how we push it out, but
so it does support. So the Azure website, I'm sorry, there's a name they call it, app service. Is it app service or whatever? Yeah, the app service does support containers. It supports deploying with containers to Azure. It's just that I'm sure there's some guidance online on how to go about it, where you would essentially push your container to Docker Hub or a Docker registry. Then there is a way you can now, like, make that deployment happen, where the Azure website instance will download the image from Docker and just set it up, locally. I'm sure if I look, I'll find, documentation on that. But essentially, yeah, we could just start right away, create something. And in fact, you don't even need to pay for like a domain name. You can just have nikeza.azurewebsites.net, at least for a start,
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk with Mitchell, who's done some stuff with Docker. And I work on getting, like this is my plan. Forget everything that we have to do. What I'm going to do is just have an HTML page with the basic design, but like basic design as is. Just add a bunch of links manually, directly to the HTML. Forget about like passing a proper data structure to Razor templates. I'm just going to do a flat file, have it served by Nikeza, and then we can go from there. Because I think that will break the ice. I think the fact that it's going to be so awful, it's going to make us want to, improve it, and it's going to create that sort of, environment that we're looking for. Because, at the end of the day, what we want to do is create things, share them with people, show people what we can do, and learn things. And document them. So the whole purpose of the Lambda Cartel is not only to showcase what we can do, but also, share with others what we've learned. And if anybody's listening to this podcast and you're having the same issue at work or with one of your projects, I feel this could be a solution, right? This could be like those, we could call this episode, the 1 hour to action, right? Or how to create a movement in 1 hour rather than 3 minutes. Because I've realized that this could be the thing that pushes us forward, right? Not that we were getting stuck or not that we were failing down or anything, but we weren't going as fast as we wanted because there are some issues, you know, there are some things at play that are outside of our control. And we felt like, you know, this is not moving fast enough. And some of us were getting a bit anxious about it, right? So Ody, this is why I enjoy having you on this show, on this podcast. Because you are, you know, like Mitchell, you explain things so well. I think that's one of your strengths as a member, is that you explain things so well, and you're someone that guides other people towards discovery. And so for that, I will forever be in that. If it wasn't that late in Nigeria, I would ask you to stay with me after the podcast to push Nikeza to production, but that wouldn't be fair because it's late for you. You had a long day at work, a long week at work, and I'm not going to do that, right? So don't worry, I'm not going to put you on the spot.
No. I would like to do it. I'm serious. Like, maybe what will happen is after this podcast, which is supposed to be an episode, we would like record a session that we would upload on YouTube and like deployments to Azure. I think it's something that, you know, if we recorded, it would be really nice. And as for, you know, me, I've slept. Don't worry about me. So when I came back, I was so excited.
You want to do this now?
Yeah.
So ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to this podcast. We're going to make a video after this one where we're going to just figure out how to push Nikeza to production as is, as ugly as it is, as unfinished. But we just want to break the ice, move forward, and get the ball rolling. So let's end the podcast on that note, because my hands are getting itchy with, you know, the like thinking about pushing this thing out and doing something. So let's just say a quick goodbye to the listeners. Anything you want to add before we leave?
No, nothing much. I'm good.
Okay, so this is probably one of the first podcasts that ends with people jumping into code and pushing something to production, right? So yeah. we are the Lambda Cartel. We don't do things like everybody else. We're unique, right? We follow our we follow our own rhythm. We go to the beat of our own drum. So thank you for listening. It has been Ody Mbegbu. Oh my God! Sorry, Ody. Ody Mbegbu and Pablo Rivera. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening in. This was episode 10, the best episode ever. I have to say that because now it's sort of like our part of tradition, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was a really, really, really great episode. Thank you so much, Ody. Again, you're awesome. Yeah. And for those of you, so it's going to be a video on our YouTube channel. Search for Lambda Cartel on YouTube. So see you on that video or see you on the podcast. Bye-bye.